Hello, welcome to the Fifth Star. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Albert.
And this is a podcast where we are trying to find our next 5-star rated movie. And when we find that movie, this podcast will fall into the dark void.
Oof. So on this episode, we are reviewing Thunderbolts asterisk. And we wrote down what we gave this movie secretly on the size whiteboard. Jamie, I'm going to first guess that you gave this movie 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Okay. I'm going to guess you gave it a 3.0.
Okay, 3.0. And we are going to give our initial spoiler-free thoughts on Thunderbolts, and then we will reveal our scores. So, Jamie, is the MCU back?
Ooh, that is the big question. Okay,
Yeah.
First, can I just say I have a theory?
Okay.
I have a theory about Disney. It's a conspiracy theory. But
Hmm.
I think Disney may have intentionally made Marvel really, really bad post-Endgame on purpose. Because all of our bars were lowered significantly.
Okay.
And I think most people had given up, right?
Yeah. I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So now when a movie like this comes out, the bar goes back up a little bit and everybody is like, whoa, this was the best movie since Endgame. But in actuality, was it?
Well, I think that could be an interesting theory, except I don't think that's a very financially good strategy to make multiple
bad movies.
Millions of dollars of hundreds of $1 million.
You're probably
on each
right.
movie.
You're probably right.
It's like, let's just spend a couple $1 billion over the span of like
It's just
5
chump
years.
change.
Yeah, and then we're gonna really lower the bar so that one day, in the distant future, we can make
It'll just
Thunderbolts.
go.
Thunderbolts is the one that's gonna bring them all back.
Everyone's going to come back to the theater by
Yeah.
the hundreds.
I mean,
I mean-
I was not expecting much. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when
Yeah.
I heard of this movie was coming out and I didn't see a trailer, I really wasn't expecting much at all.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think
My bar was lower.
Yeah, in that sense, probably most people were in the same spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think this kind of surprised you then?
I think ultimately, without remaining vague,
Mhm.
to remain spoiler free,
Yeah.
I thought the movie was kind of cheesy in the
Ooh,
Marvel way,
Interesting.
but at the same time had like some really sweet moments. Like there was a lot of sweetness
Yeah.
within some of the cheesy. Yeah. But however, was I blown away? Not really, because I kind of realized towards the end of the movie
Mhm.
that this kind of feels like Guardians of the Galaxy reskinned.
Okay. Interesting statement. I definitely see where you're coming from with that statement.
Hmm.
I don't know if I agree with that though.
Do you want me to explain?
Okay, you can explain.
Okay, so it's a bunch of ragtag, lonely nobodies
Yeah.
who all come together once they're imprisoned
Mm-hmm.
in a prison, and they somehow join forces but butt heads the entire time.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, they come together and overcome the Power Stone as a unit, holding hands.
Yeah. I mean, Suicide Squad. There's
Oh,
a
I haven't seen Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
Is it
there's
like
a
that too?
handful of these kind of the leftover heroes, the B
Mhm.
team, and you kind of make a whole team out of them.
Or the anti-heroes. They're
Yeah.
like kind
Mhm.
of bad guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was definitely expecting a Guardians of the Galaxy type movie.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's just Avengers, the main team is done, so we're just gonna create like this kind of alternate group, which is what they're aiming for. But I was surprised that Guardians of the Galaxy was definitely just all fun and a certain kind of vibe with the music and
There were touching
all of
moments
that.
though.
okay, that's fair.
And Star-Lord was Gamora's target.
Okay.
She was hired to get him.
So I was expecting a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of reskin.
Yeah.
But this movie I thought was definitely not that movie.
Okay.
It was much more dramatic than I expected. It was much more emotional. The amount that the drama kind of hits you is going to be very personal.
Yeah.
Because there's a massive theme throughout this movie.
Yeah.
That's generally about just mental health,
Depression.
And for me, I'm not someone who has struggled with that in kind of the depth that maybe some other people have had. So in that sense, like I think I maybe didn't appreciate it as much as someone who I think there are going to be people who really connect with that theme.
I think so too.
Deeply.
Right.
Yeah. But I thought they did a really good job with that theme. And they made it really very much at the forefront of the whole story.
That's what I didn't like. I thought it was so on the nose. Like it was I wanted a little more subtext. You know?
Okay.
When they were playing with the metaphor in more subtle ways, I thought it was way stronger than when they were kind of explicit about the theme.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, to that point, I can see that. I agree with you in terms of just the objective movie, but this is a Marvel movie.
Right.
Right? Like, so I'm thinking Marvel, it's gonna be just all fluff, is all just gonna be kind of flashy and explosions and all that. But even the action was very subdued. None of the main kind of heroes are super flying, superhuman. They're just like good fighters, right? And so I thought even the kind of spectacle of it was very small for the most part. And it just made it feel like a much more intimate type of movie. Like almost like a character study of Florence Pugh and maybe her and her dad and their relationship, more of that kind of thing than a superhero movie. And I think that was very surprising. I wasn't expecting that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of appreciated the fact that MCU or a Marvel movie went for that.
Yeah.
And to me, it makes sense when you see that the director is a guy named Jake Schreier, who I didn't know him by name, but I've seen, when I looked up his filmography, he's like an indie filmmaker. Like he did Robot and Frank with Frank Langella back like over 10 years ago. And then he did Paper Towns, which I didn't see. Have you seen Paper Towns?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's the guy who directed that. And then he did Beef recently, which is
right.
Yeah, like which I did see, and I mean it was just like really dark and very interesting, but intense. And it's like this guy coming from like the independent world, doing a big MCU movie. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that he kind of brought his flavor to it, I think I like that. I don't know, what do you think of that part of it?
I still felt like it was very Marvel. And what I mean by that is that there were a lot of moments where characters would show up and it didn't make sense why or how they were showing up, and it felt very convenient, and that kind of bugged me a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they also kept making light of serious things. Like there were a lot of little one-liners it's very Marvel. Like it's how they've always been. It's the formula. And then it also bugged me how the antagonist kind of felt like a little bit of a caricature, where it's sort of like
one of the antagonists.
Yeah, where it's sort of like, oh, here's a moment that we can empathize with you, and we're just gonna throw it away and toss it aside and not let it impact anything.
Yeah,
and instead keep this character just kind of silly and not take them seriously. And that like kind of bugged me because I felt like they could have gone in a different direction, and I thought they were, and then they didn't, and I was disappointed. So there was like a lot of moments like that where I felt like they kept making light of moments that could have been really serious.
Yeah.
But there was a very good moment towards the end, which I won't specify anything.
We'll talk about later.
But there was a very good moment where they didn't make light of it, and they kept it pretty serious, and I liked that. And I was like, that was a good choice. I'm glad Marvel is like starting to head in that direction, but I kind of wanted even more of that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so I can point out more specific lines later, but
but still thinking big picture. I think for me, what was weird is that if this movie was not an MCU movie, I think I would have maybe enjoyed it even more. Because
interesting.
I actually kind of disagree with you. I thought like they didn't make light of it too much. Yeah, there were some parts like I can see what you're saying, but I thought they were pretty consistent with the theme and did take it kind of seriously. And I thought that to me it was good in terms of what they were trying to do. And I respect the fact that the MCU was trying to, kind of take this gamble and tell this more dramatic character story.
Yeah, I agree.
But I can't help but compare it to like the movies that have come before.
Yeah.
And, like it's just, they've set themselves up for failure forever because like what they did during those early stages of the Avengers and leading up to Endgame was just so brilliant and such an amazing run.
And if they try to replicate it, it's so obvious.
They'll never be able to.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why they've just been languishing around because they're like trying to figure out how to do that again,
Yeah,
but
they're like
they
floundering.
can't. Yeah. And this movie actually acknowledges that in some way. They're like, okay, we're just acknowledging like we're never going to be able to get back to that. So we're just going to kind of tread new ground, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is smart. But like you mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, like I couldn't help but compare this to Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I think I just enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy more because it was just so much more fun and entertaining.
And it was more original at the time. To me, anyway, I remember thinking like, whoa, I've never seen a movie like this.
Yeah, like the style and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it's almost like I don't expect my MCU movie to be so intense and so serious, But like Batman, I get like The Dark Knight when that happened, it was like, okay, I get that because Batman is a dark character, Now maybe it's because growing up, I didn't really know about the Thunderbolts. So maybe it's because I didn't know any of that backstory. There is perhaps a lot more there, but I don't know. That's the part of it that I was kind of torn about. It's like, yes, this movie in a vacuum, I think I really liked it.
Right.
But when I compare it to the fact that it's an MCU brand, it made me kind of feel like, I don't know, does this really fit?
Right.
Like the brand?
Well, I think it does because they've done very serious movies in the past. Like Civil War is a really heavy, complex, kind of dark movie.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, where characters are battling trauma and they don't make light of it in that movie. It's quite solemn. So I think they've done it before. I know they can do it again.
Yeah. It was just tonally very different, I think, in some ways. Yeah. Like the action wasn't quite as spectacular. Like none of the...
And the bad guy was very... Again, like the bad guy, it was hard to take seriously.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about it later after we reveal our score and spoilers, but I thought the bad guy was very compelling and made it really interesting. But it also was like, ooh, like, did they really maximize what you could do?
The bad guy had potential.
Yeah.
But I think fell flat in the end.
So, okay, this is my take on this movie. I think this movie seems like it's generally getting a lot of really good reviews, and I get that.
People are excited that it's not garbage.
Yes, exactly. So, perhaps that's just because there's just been so much bad and it's like relieving just the fact that it's just not terrible, right? Yeah. And actually like pretty good. But in terms of like, is this the movie that's bringing the MCU back? I don't think so just yet.
I agree.
To me, this movie is like hey, like, let's get excited for Fantastic Four. Because it's very much, I think, almost like a setup for Fantastic Four. And really, whether or not the MCU is going to survive in the future or not is going to be purely based on how much Fantastic Four delivers or doesn't.
I don't think it's setting up that.
Really?
But I've also seen the trailer.
Okay, so I haven't seen the trailer, but in this movie, there is a reference to Fantastic Four. In the very post-credit scene. Oh, you didn't stay for the end of the credits?
Oh, whoops.
Okay, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it at the end.
It's been so long since I saw a Marvel movie.
So there's totally There's a mid-credit.
I saw that one.
Yeah, credit.
And then I left.
And then at the very end, there is a one, and so we'll talk about that later. But I think this movie is very much that movie. It's like, let's set the stage for Fantastic Four, get people like on board again, thinking about Marvel. I can't believe you
stayed. Don't you hate spoilers?
Yeah, but I didn't know what the spoiler was going to be. I just saw people were staying, and I'm like, this is Marvel, so I figured there's going to be something at the very end.
Gonna give it away.
Yeah. But I don't
Okay.
know.
Anyway.
Now, okay. But in terms of the cast,
Yeah.
what do you think of the cast?
I mean, Florence Pugh is great as
Yeah.
always.
I thought she was great.
She's always good. David Harbour's great. I thought everybody did a good job.
Yeah, so I agree. Like, I think Florence Pugh was fantastic. To me, this movie was essentially built off of the performances of Florence Pugh and also David Harbour. Like, without those two, this movie would have been very, very flat for me. But I think because Florence Pugh, like, she really delivered on the kind of emotional, dramatic scenes. At least for me, it didn't come across as cheesy, and it felt like very earnest and genuine. But if there wasn't David Harbour, it would have just been all serious and no fun and games. And David Harbour, like, single-handedly playing
So funny.
the Red Guardian, like, he was so funny to me. And the movie, like, really kind of kicked off, when he starts to have more screen time. And yeah, so like, he's kind of the element that made it still bring it back and make it feel like a Marvel movie still.
Yeah. It's true.
So I thought those two were fantastic. And then, we have another character which we'll talk about more in depth, but Louis Pullman. I thought he was really good too. So
I've seen him in other stuff and he's fantastic.
Oh, okay.
In this, there were moments where I was kind of like not fully convinced of him.
Oh.
But
Compared to his other roles, I guess.
Maybe.
Okay. I haven't seen him in anything before, I don't think.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know he was Bill Pullman's son. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Is that laugh like I knew?
I mean, I watched him he is so good in Lessons in Chemistry, which is like an Apple TV show.
Oh, okay.
He did such a good job in that, and I immediately like looked him up, and then I was like, oh, that's Bill Pullman's son. That's crazy. Like, I thought he looked familiar because he kind of looks like his dad just a little bit. In this movie, he didn't really.
Yeah.
I think it was the hair.
So in this movie, all I could see when I looked at him was Heath Ledger.
Oh.
I could not
like from
stop
10 Things I
seeing...
Hate About You?
Yeah.
The hair.
And rest
the
in
hair's
peace.
Crazy.
Yeah, but like the hair, even like his facial mannerisms, like I was like, oh my gosh, this looks almost like a Heath Ledger deep fake.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was just like really distracting for me, but I thought he did a great job. So
yeah,
he was a really good part of the movie, and he was very important in the movie. So it was good that he kind of got pulled into that. But his role was actually supposed to be apparently played by Steve Yeun. Yeah.
What happened?
And I don't know. My guess is one of two things. So the director worked with Steve Yeun in Beef. So maybe through that relationship, like, he was supposed to play this character.
Okay.
But I think maybe it might be because of Invincible. So Stephen was the voice of the main character in Invincible.
Interesting.
And that character, in some ways, there's a lot of overlap to the character that Louis Pullman plays. So maybe it was like, oh, it's too similar, So
that's
like,
a good theory.
I don't know. But it is interesting how the movie might have felt different if it was.
Yeah, it would have been a very different vibe.
Yeah. I will say one thing I wish I had done before I saw this movie was rewatch Black Widow, because I didn't realize it would be so much based off of kind of the tail end of what happens after that. But okay, do you want to reveal?
Yes.
All right. So you guessed that I will give a 3.0 out of 5, and I give it a 3.5 out of 5. Yeah.
We flipped.
Oh, you gave it a 3. Yeah, okay, sounded like it. Man, I'm surprised. I thought the fact that this movie it was more character focused, I thought that you might enjoy it more.
I think that all the on the nose stuff
was
too much.
Okay.
If they had gone with more subtle ways to just convey, I mean, we're going to get into spoilers now.
Yeah.
Just convey depression in a more nuanced way, I think this would have killed. But because there were so many just obvious, like, I'm depressed, like, this is my depression, like, I've been traumatized.
Yeah.
Like, there were just too many moments where I kind of felt like the metaphor wasn't a metaphor. It was just like
literally
on the nose.
I mean, literally,
This is
the bad
darkness.
guy is darkness.
Yeah.
He has the void and goes into we go into the void.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, dang.
And you need a big group hug to pull you out of it.
Exactly. So I was talking to my husband on the way home, and we came up with what I think could have been maybe a cooler way to flesh this metaphor out.
Okay.
At the beginning, I was so sold. Like when they all get trapped in the vault and they're all like each other's marks, I was like, oh shoot, they're gonna have to work together to like get out of this thing. And it's gonna be the whole movie. I thought it was gonna be the whole movie.
Oh, you thought it was gonna be like a whole like bottle episode?
Yes.
That could have been interesting.
Been so cool because the whole metaphor of like them getting trapped in this maze of, what did she call it? She called it like the maze of shame or whatever. They could be physically trapped in this vault and emotionally trapped in their own like pain. And then think how that could have just like built up tension between them as they're like trying to work together, but then also they keep like getting sent into these depressive episodes.
Yeah, especially with Bob there, and every time he touches someone's hand, and then they start getting all paranoid and
Bob could be like more motivated to like bring them down maybe. And then the goal is to lift him up at the end. Like that could have been so interesting.
But I think if it was that movie would have been even darker and even more serious.
True.
I mean, you wouldn't have had David Harbour there.
Well, I was trying to think of ways to get them in there. So Sebastian Stan, I think he still could have like somehow gotten his way into the vault.
He was finding out what was going on.
Yeah. And then maybe Julia Louis-Dreyfus is just trying to lock them in until they all kill each other. So she's like keeping them. And it would have been cool if she like had a way to talk to them through like an intercom or whatever to try and like convince Bob to kill them all.
Okay.
And like, yeah, she just shuts the whole vault down so that they literally can't get out. And then maybe Sebastian Stan finds a way to break in or somehow, you know, gets the assistant to help him. And then maybe David Harbour also could have been with him somehow. Like they run into each other and then they become like a little duo.
Okay.
And then maybe David Harbour gets a hold of the intercom and that's when he gives Florence Pugh his whole speech. I don't know. Like, I just think it would have been so interesting, though, if they had done that, because no other Marvel movie has done that.
Yeah.
Like, basically a chamber film.
Man, I don't know if you can do that in a Marvel movie. Like,
oh, but it could have been so cool.
I mean, in this movie, you had, like, buildings collapsing in Grand Central Station, like in New York City on the streets. And it still didn't feel like enough spectacle for me, you know? So if we were all stuck at the bottom of a vault the whole movie.
Well, you could have done. No, they're trying to get out. So I also imagine that there were like different levels in the vault.
Yeah, it was a little.
Where there could be like other things happening, maybe. And then maybe when they go inside of their depressive rooms, like there could be action in that. Moments where they're fighting their own demons.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't super on board when they were just stuck in the vault. I was like, they were trying to be all like kind of quippy and like work together, but it just like didn't really feel like the whole movie was like gelling totally, or it didn't really get going until they got out and until we start to find out. Because the whole time you're like, who's this Bob guy?
I lost interest after they got out.
Oh, really? But what happens to Bob? And then he flies up in the air and all this, then you're like, whoa, who is it? Like, what's going on here?
True.
And to me, like, Bob is the only one that really makes it still feel like a superhero movie. Everyone else is just like, they're just assassins, right? But Bob is like a genuine, like, Superman type superhero, all powerful. And so
boring.
I think, yeah, you don't like superheroes, but I do.
I don't like invincible superheroes.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of one kind of nitpick I had was, so Bob, he, you know, gets influenced by Valentina and then, you know, starts to work for her. And then, you know, he gets the whole like blonde hair and the Sentry costume and all that. And you just see how powerful he is. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then, you know, when he starts starts thinking for himself, Valentina's like, oh, okay, let's get the kill switch and turn him off. And then the assistant Mel goes like, oh, that got burned with all the other stuff. And then she's like, "Oh, so go just have
Go
them
make
make
me
it
another
again."
one.
Yeah, and then it feels like just like the next scene, she has the kill switch.
Every beat, it was like that for me. I
Oh,
thought.
really?
Like every beat. So like the moment they get out of the vault was when everything started to feel way too convenient.
Oh, I
Where
don't
it's
know.
like
I don't think
suddenly
so.
the ghost girl comes back with a car, and I'm like, how did you know who they were? They were in disguise. Like, how did you know that that was them? Unless you can like see through their helmets. And then why did you come back? Well, I guess it makes sense why she came back for them, but like her whole character made no sense to me the entire time.
She kind of was
Ghost
like,
girl, I don't even remember
yeah,
her name.
Yeah, she was kind of pointless, but she
Yeah.
was cool, like in terms of just her ability, and
And then
she was there for the
Sebastian
action.
Stan like kind of conveniently shows up,
Yeah.
which I guess he was tracking the girl's phone, so that's how he found them. But then
his action sequence was cool.
The whole
His Mad
limo
Max
thing where it's like David Harbour happened to be picking them up and overhearing their conversation, and then they like say the coordinates of the vault like out loud or something.
Oh, wasn't he like tracking her phone or something? Wasn't that
David
how he did
Harbour?
it? Yeah, that wasn't how it was that he found them.
I don't know if he was. I don't think they ever said that.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought.
Because I was like, okay, now he's showing up at the most convenient time, and like, how is he able to find them in the middle of the desert? There were just so many moments where I was like, this doesn't make sense. And it kept doing that. And then the fact that like the kill switch was just like an inconvenience that they overcame in an instant.
Yeah, the other stuff didn't bother me as much, but the kill switch did kind of annoy me because I was like, they literally just said that it got burned up.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, just make me a new one. So they just had the schematics like on some backup that weren't in the vault with everything else and that had to they got to get rid of.
And how did the kill switch even work?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it just like fried his brain, I guess.
Yeah.
But the thing I liked was I was thankful because after the kill switch, that was just like a way to really turn on the true power of Sentry, right? The Void. And so the fact that it wasn't just the end, but it was just really a setup for like the real bad guy, I actually appreciated that. And when he started like just poofing people, that was actually like pretty intense, I thought.
When he started poofing people.
Yeah.
I heard when they were doing the whole like poofing thing that it was inspired by the like Hiroshima bombs because they like left those shadows.
Yeah. Like a atomic bomb shadow.
Which is like a very dark way to see it. But like, I don't know. It was very creative, yeah. And turning New York City black was cool too.
Yeah, like the shadow just overtaking the Void. I was seeing Watchmen, where like the big blue guys are just like floating really slowly and then just like disintegrating people. Yeah. So like a little different visual thing, but the kind of aura, unstoppable kind of power. Yeah. But then when they poofed the little girl, that was surprising.
Yeah, that was really shocking.
Yeah.
But then like, I feel like as soon as Florence Pugh poofed, you were kind of like, oh yeah, okay, they're not dead.
But that's true.
I think one thing, going back to my whole trapped in a vault idea, it would have been really cool if Bob was like being controlled by the Void like the whole time they were in the vault, and the whole goal is to find the real Bob inside of the like Void? Mirror world or whatever. And that could have been the big reveal, is that like, oh, this actually isn't a bad guy, this is just a guy that's extremely traumatized who like we need to help him. That would have been so cool. Anyway,
but I guess you kind of needed the initial like friendship between Florence Pugh and Bob for her to really believe that later when he becomes the Void, that there is the good guy in there.
Well, maybe Bob like is sort of fighting for control over the body. I don't know.
So he kind of goes like in and out of those two personas.
Maybe that could be interesting. But then another thing that annoyed me was at the end when he like forgets everything again.
Yeah.
I was like, what was the point?
Okay. Thematically, right? Going back to the theme.
Yeah.
Depression, mental health and all that stuff. It was a little, it was good for the theme that in the end, the final climax is ultimately like them embracing Bob and
It's
kind
a good
of
theme.
yeah, it is.
Community is how we
Yes, overcome, and that's what ties these ragtag group of losers, quote unquote, together, right? And they find family in each other and acceptance and all that. Because it's not just Bob, right? It's Florence Pugh and the fake Captain America guy, like John Walker. So all of them are kind of essentially in the same place in life, but it is a little anticlimactic in terms of just Marvel cinema, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, like there's no like big fight scene at the end.
There's no repercussions really.
Yeah. But the problem I think becomes when, he comes out of the void, that he forgets everything. I think it's thematically a little misleading, because it's like is it saying then the way you overcome the depression or the whatever is to just like forget about it, It's like if you forget all the bad stuff that happened, then you'll be happy and you'll be fine.
It's kind of a weird
yeah, so
reset.
It almost seems like he didn't really conquer his demons in a way.
Yeah.
Right? So
I did like, though,
I don't know.
one thing that was cool about the whole metaphor is him physically like beating up the void. I thought was cool because it's a way of showing how he's felt like a victim his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And he's now saying, I'm not going to be the victim anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be a victim of my own, things, and instead choosing to conquer it. It's a way more empowering message than Florence Pugh's initial solution, which was to just shove it down.
Yeah.
And so it was cool to see him physically taking control, or taking and choosing to beat it up rather than allowing it to continue to control him.
Yeah. But even that, it wasn't about because he was doing that, but in that anger, he was being conquered by it.
True.
Right? So it was really about, I don't know, it's like a way of almost embracing that this is perhaps a part of who you are, but, in the support of the community that you have with you, you can kind of get through and overcome.
You can fight against it.
Yeah. Without doing it in like out of like a negative.
In a defeatist way.
Yeah. I guess.
Because I think, I don't know, I was a little confused about that. It seemed like he was winning, but then you're right, like he was still kind of being taken over by the void.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, it was interesting because I took it as like a very empowering moment. And then obviously the community is what ultimately like keeps him from fully embracing it again.
Yeah.
But I guess I was a little confused about what they were saying there.
Okay. So we need to start talking about the post-credit scene or the end credit scene, because there's a reference to or basically it's like 14 months later, and then they're in like the Stark Tower or the New Avengers home. And they are kind of quibbling over the fact that, the Falcon guy, I forget what his name is, but the Anthony Mackie Falcon is like copywriting like the Avengers name or the New Avengers, so they can't use it. And then so David Harbour has like a funny thing where he's like, "Oh, I figured it out, guys," and he has like a jumpsuit that says the New Avengers with a Z like patch over the S. And then he's like, "Yeah, like this will be us, right? That's not copyrighted." So they're kind of doing that, but then you see Lewis Pullman, he's like in the corner and he's just kind of like sitting there, and he's like, so he's still with them, he's kind of hanging out with them, but he's not using his powers. So the whole thing is like he doesn't want to use his powers, because if he does, it risks like the void coming back. So I think there is this kind of duality with this character, and Sentry is an actual character that I didn't grow up with, or I don't remember when I was growing up, but apparently that is kind of the way his character is written, that like in order for him to really use the superpowers, it always opens the door to like the demon
to
side
embracing the darkness.
Yeah, like the void, it opens the door for the void to come back.
So what is that saying? Metaphorically, anyway.
I don't know, but there is an element of
my depression is my power. It's kind of a weird.
No, maybe it's that. I don't know. And this is where like maybe the metaphor starts to break down a little bit. And there is maybe a little bit of like, I don't know, has he really conquered it? If he's
still controlled by it.
Yeah, the way he's conquering it and keeping it under control is to not ever go, do anything that's gonna
that feels like the shoving down.
Yeah,
which is
in a way. Yeah, so but that is the way his character kind of ends in that situation. And
I don't know if I like that.
And then all of a sudden they get like a red alert on like the monitor, and then they're like, "Oh, there's a spaceship entering the Earth's atmosphere," and then they like zoom in, and it's the Fantastic Four like ship. So that's the way it ends. So it's Thunderbolts is clearly a setup for they are the new Avengers. When Fantastic Four arrives, they're going to be the ones to kind of initially like confront them or whatever. Yeah. So I think they're very much supposed to be in the next movie or in the Fantastic Four movie. And
I'd be surprised if they were.
Okay. Well, and then Century is, I think, going to be like whether it's Fantastic Four or not, there's going to come a point where everything is like all the good guys are about to have lost and the end is near, and he's going to have to access his powers at the risk of the Void coming back, right? So it seems like that's what his character is set up for in the future.
I don't know if I like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I like that messaging of like, oh, like my darkness is my power. Like, that's not empowering. That's more, that feels defeatist, which I don't know if I like.
Yeah, I don't know. There are some parts of it where I agree with you, but I think overall, I still really appreciated the fact that they fully committed to this theme. I think if they kind of half-heartedly did it and then still try to make a Guardians of the Galaxy and just try to make it a fun movie,
right?
That had themes of like mental health sprinkled in, that would have just been like so weird.
That would have been watered down.
Yeah, but they, I think they really tried to give it, in the proper focus and attention.
Yeah,
it's just the conclusion and how everything wraps up that doesn't really.
It didn't quite work.
Feel like it all kind of fits.
I did love David Harbour's speech, or Dave Harbour's speech at the end. Like, that was really good and heartfelt, and I felt like they didn't make light of it. I mean, Florence Pugh said a little tiny joke, but it felt like earnest. Didn't feel like a quip. So that whole scene was great. But then she does it inside of the room when she finds Bob. And she says, like, she makes a joke about, oh, yeah, I'm great. I'm in a shame maze of my worst memories. And it's like, why did you have to make a joke in this moment? Like, he's hurting. Like, just, go help him, like what you came to do. And instead, you're, like, making a joke to try and get the audience to laugh. And I just, I hate it when Marvel does that.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think sometimes... It's true though that like, the only way to deal with some of this darkness and some of these feelings sometimes is through humor, right?
Yeah, but like that moment felt really just tone deaf's not the right word, but like it just felt out of place and forced.
Okay,
like
I get that.
Yeah, and then that happened or it didn't happen, thankfully. When Julia Louis-Dreyfus had her like depressing scene, thankfully she didn't make a joke afterwards.
Yeah, but she definitely makes very light of it. Like,
she did make very light of it, which was disappointing because I thought like, oh, finally we're gonna like get to see who she really is. Because this whole time she's been playing a character, but this is who she really is. Like, this is her actual trauma. Let's actually empathize with her more. And then they do nothing with that. Yeah. And she reverts right back to her character. And like when she's about to die and then the assistant saves her life and then she's like, oh, thank goodness. What was I going to do without you? Oh, man, that would have been a disaster. All right, let's call somebody to take care of the body. And like she just immediately reverts, even though she almost died. Like, she should be traumatized. She should like have trouble breathing. She should, I don't know.
She definitely feels the most like comic booky, like
like,
villainy type of character.
And she could have. There's so much potential with her. Like she could be so much more interesting, but instead they kind of like turned her into a 2-dimensional character.
Yeah. I don't know. Are you excited more for the future of the MCU after this movie, or does it change anything for you?
No, not really.
It doesn't?
No, I'm glad that it was like better than a bad movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad that it wasn't horrible. And I mean, I still plan on seeing Fantastic Four, but I'm not really excited about other MCU movies. Something I maybe should have mentioned too is that I'm not a big superhero movie person. There are some exceptions.
Yeah.
These two on the wall.
The two.
But ultimately, like I don't really love them. I don't really love the genre too much.
Yeah. Well, having grown up in the 80s and 90s with Marvel Prime, X-Men on the cartoon on TV, and the Batman animated series, and the Spider-Man animated one.
Batman animated.
Yeah, all of those Masterworks and, the comics and all of that. I do want the Marvel to still stick around. I want their movies to be relevant and good. I don't want every movie to try to just be that.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I'm glad. I respect I think honestly, I was probably between a 3.0 and a 3.5. But I think just the fact that they try to do something different, I give them props for that. And
see, I couldn't because I was trying to just compare it to nothing. Like as a blank slate.
Okay. And, but I will say, I don't know if the kind of excitement of, the MCU's back with Thunderbolts quite is how I feel. I feel like this is, okay, intriguing. I'm looking forward to Fantastic Four. Not that I wouldn't have seen it already. I still was going to, but it gives me hope that the Fantastic Four is going to deliver and that they kind of have a plan going forward. But unfortunately, the new Avengers of the Thunderbolts, they don't live up to the original Avengers. So,
and I don't really care about watching the new Avengers movie.
I agree with you. So I hope, Fantastic Four just does so well and is really great. And we just kind of stick with them. And then, they're going to pull X-Men in at some point, right? I would be okay if this is all we see of the Thunderbolts. I wouldn't miss it. But yeah, let us know what you think. Is the MCU back?
Let us know what you think. And you can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Letterboxd, or Apple Podcasts.
And we'll see you next week as we continue our quest for the 5th star.